Hi, I'm Robert Wright. I run the Non-Zero Foundation, which produces all the shows on Blogging Heads TV and Meaning of Life TV. We host a variety of voices, some of them pretty unorthodox, and we encourage dialogue that is sharp but civil. We think fostering constructive conversation is especially important now that America and the world are looking kind of fragile. If you agree that our mission is important, I hope you'll consider helping us shoulder the cost. You can do that by becoming one of our cherished patrons at patreon.com/nonzero foundation. That's NonZeroFoundation. Thanks. We need your help, and we deeply appreciate it.
Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Now, this is Thursday morning, so we haven't received the name of the Supreme Court nominee yet. It's supposed to be Saturday. Maybe we'll leak Friday. The vibe I'm getting from you, Matt Lewis, in Southern DMZ, NeverTrumper Matt Lewis, is you're pretty cool with this. You will accept. You know, Trump should not be denied a Supreme Court judge because he is awful in every other respect. A conservative judge is a conservative judge. However you get it, however the process, doesn't matter. Score one for Donald Trump.
No, I wouldn't quite put it that way, but I am. Look, I would say one thing is Trump is very bad, and I'll take if I'm going to take the bad. I've taken the bad. I'd like to get the good. And this is getting the good. Trump is a duly elected president. And so even though he's bad on a whole bunch of stuff, he still gets he's the president. We have one president at a time. He gets to make a nomination. And then we have U.S. senators that we have elected. And they will get to either confirm or not that justice. Based on who we think Trump is probably going to pick, I think it's going to be a highly qualified and good justice. And so I see this as something that is a positive. If you're a conservative, now if you're a progressive, I would totally understand. You probably shouldn't like this. But my problems with Trump are the areas where Trump does things that, let's say, President Mitt Romney wouldn't do or President Marco Rubio wouldn't do. And I think this is a case where, you know, President Romney or President Rubio would probably do exactly what Trump is doing. I would actually hope that they would. I mean, there's an argument that Trump is better than them because they would back down now. But I think they would do exactly what he's doing. I think he'd probably pick the same judge, possibly, that he'll pick.
Now, I have a few things to say in response. I don't need to say them all at once.
We've got all day, baby.
So let's just try to stay focused on sort of one piece that's at a time. Now you, Matt Lewis, did not vote for Trump.
Correct.
So you, as an individual, have not engaged in the devil's bargain. I am going to support Trump, even though I know he is terrible, in exchange for the judges I want and the tax cuts I want. You have not engaged in that bargain. You're going to have your cake and eat it too. You don't even have to vote for him, and you still get your judges. If you are somebody who is saying they're going to vote for him and they support him, is it morally acceptable to be engaged in this devil's bargain when Trump is simultaneously nominating this justice while also openly threatening to subvert the results of the election? Are you doing something untoward by saying, look, hey, I'm gonna pick and choose what I like about this guy while I am actively encouraging people to vote for him?
Well, look, I would say, I'm judging the Supreme Court thing by the merits of the Supreme Court. Like, is it constitutional what he's doing? Is he picking someone who's qualified? Things like that. I think overall, I wasn't willing to make that devil's bargain, because I think that the damage that he does, the erosion of the norms, and the social fabric, that was not, and just the chance that he's such a loose cannon that he could do something really horrible, like not step down, if he loses. I thought that wasn't a deal worth making. And so I just disagree. And there are people, I mean, I have friends that I respect who voted for Hillary, which is something I didn't do. And I don't think, I just didn't do and wouldn't have done. And I have friends and loved ones who voted for Trump. And I respect their decision and I understand their calculus, but I don't think it was certainly not a move I would have made.
Now, you mentioned that Trump is a duly elected president and has the constitutional power to make this appointment. Were you and other Republicans making a similar argument in 2016?
I would have to go back and look. I don't think I ever wrote anything about Merrick Garland or said anything about Merrick Garland that I would be embarrassed by today. My recollection is this. I think that President Obama had every right to nominate Merrick Garland. And I think Merrick Garland was probably a qualified judge and a decent guy and certainly not a radical pick. And I think President Obama had every right. Now, of course, President Obama had already gotten two, just like President Trump had already gotten two confirmations. I think President Obama had every right to nominate Merrick Garland. And then I think that the Senate had every right to sit on the nomination, which they did, or vote it down. I think the big mistake that Republicans made was creating this bullshit argument, which said that it was actually a very stupid argument because they didn't even need to say it. It was like lying when the truth would suffice. But Republicans concocted this argument that said it's too close to the election and the next president should get to decide.
And the American people should decide.
Right. So it would be sort of a referendum on, and I think that holding that seat open actually did help Donald Trump. You could argue that is why Donald Trump got elected. There are people like, I think Tim Alberta, for example, has argued. I think it's Tim Alberta. I don't want to cite the wrong person, but smart people have argued that's why Trump won. And when you only win by 77,000 votes, it could be a lot of things, right? But I think that was Republicans. Mitch McConnell had every right to sit on that nomination. It's not unprecedented. It's happened before. It happened to John Quincy Adams. But I think that it would have been better to simply say, we're going to have a hearing and we're going to vote against him. And let's be honest. The old days of voting for judges just because they're qualified are over. They were over when Democrats borked Robert Bork. They were over when they went after, Miguel Estrada and Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh. And I mean, we could go down the list. And so it's now about more than just, are you qualified? It's really about ideology, and it has been for a long time. And we're simply going to vote against him. And I think there would have been a political price to pay, right? Because Merrick Garland might have very well comported himself terrifically and come across as quite moderate in those hearings. And it would have been, a ding on the Republicans politically. And on the other hand, maybe they did Merrick Garland a favor too, like jumping through all those hoops to ultimately not be confirmed and possibly having dirt come out about you. Who knows? We don't know of any, but you never know. I just think it was a mistake and that Republicans are paying for it now. But having said that, I don't think it was wrong that Obama didn't get his pick. See, we elect Republican senators, and they have the right to either confirm whoever controls the Senate. The Senate has a right, as an independent branch, they can confirm or reject nominees. And if you care about, and here's part of the deal, Bill, I do care about comedy and norms and things like that. Of course, as a conservative, I should, but I also care about people who share my worldview being in charge of big decisions involving public policy. And I think there's nothing wrong with wanting judges who share your values to be on the Supreme Court, because the court has become so important in determining the outcome of hot button issues, certainly going back to Roe versus Wade. And so anyway, I don't think what Republicans did was wrong at all. I just think that they posited this BS argument that is now hurting. It's come home to roost, so to speak.
Well, I agree with almost everything you said there. And I appreciate you calling it a bullshit argument, because it is, and
yes.
it was, and it is. But where I disagree with you is that it was a mistake for them to do that from their perspective. And the other part that you said, that it would have been a ding if on Republicans to see Garland present himself, comport himself well. I think that's the exact reason why it wasn't done. Because they had to create a narrative, continue a narrative, that Democrats always nominate activist liberal judges, and they want to create an activist liberal court. And Merrick Garland was bona fide moderate, long championed by Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch has been advocating for Garland for years. He was 64. This was not like a 36-year-old left-winger who would be on the court for 4 decades. This is a straight-up nod like, hey, I'm the president, you're Republican Senate, we got to meet halfway, here's a compromise pick. And if that was held up to the light in hearings, now maybe they would have still held the line and voted him down, but it wasn't a certainty. You know, maybe someone would have broken, maybe someone would have budged, and at minimum, you would not be able to credibly argue this guy was an unreasonable pick for Obama to make, and maybe that would have had an impact, on the election too. Now, Republicans, to my mind, they're not credibly saying it, but they are saying it. You would have done this too. You would have played hardball too. I mean, Democrats would have nominated somebody. Of course, they did nominate somebody. I mean, the argument in 2016 was the president is the president for the entirety of the 4 years. It doesn't stop at year 3. That was the argument at the time. So of course, I
totally agree with that.
But they need to argue. They need to say, "Hey, sure we're full of shit. Sure, our arguments make no sense at all. But this is politics, and you guys play politics, and we play politics. Jamie Weinstein, who is going to come on the DMZ tomorrow.
Everybody on Friday. What is it? At 11 a.m. Eastern. Bill and I will talk for about a half hour, and then we'll bring in Jamie Weinstein to take our questions and take your questions on the DM Zoom.
So he had a tweet that I responded to where he listed Democratic grievances and Republican grievances. And the Democratic grievances were an incredibly short list. And the Republican grievances was this long list, and it was defeating Bork, it was filibustering Alito, and my response. I have a number of responses, but Democrats filibustered Alito by doing a perfunctory protest vote against cloture, knowing full well they weren't going to stop Alito. Democrats blocked Bork on an up or down vote, not a filibuster. There were a few Republicans that joined him on that. And then accepted Anthony Kennedy. It wasn't, we're going to hold this seat open until we get it for ourselves. Your point about ideology, that was the beginning of ideology being part of the debate, but it wasn't the end of compromising on judges. They compromised on Anthony Kennedy.
Right. But I would say that what happened is, and this goes back to Nixon even, Republicans would nominate somebody, or Reagan nominates Bork, who would have been basically like Antonin Scalia, we think. And you don't get Bork, you get someone who's not as good. And so we end up with a court full of Republican appointees who are really compromise picks.
Well, they're compromise. I mean, that was a time when there's a Republican president and a Democratic Senate.
Right.
So they compromised on the pick. That's what the advice and consent process is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be zero sum.
But here's where I think. Okay, so I agree with you. I think Republicans, the bullshit argument about Merrick Garland, it was a smart political move in the short term. But obviously, they created a standard that they could not and would not abide by, right? And so I think in the long run, it was a stupid move because they didn't. So McConnell didn't have to say this is about power and we are in control and we are going to do what we want so we can take power. I think the argument is ideas mean things. These are important issues over the future of America, and conservatives have a philosophy and values and a worldview. And so, of course, we're going to vote. We want, conservative appointees because we believe we share their values, we share their worldview, and we think that this is important. And so, we're not acting like politicians by using whatever levers we have to try to push for nominees who share our values. Like this is why people get involved in politics to begin with. Well, this isn't an evil dark thing. This is why we get involved to begin with.
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court is supposed to be, it's designed to be independent from politics. I mean, it's critical to understand that there's no perfect way to insulate. You can't appoint it through some sort of independent, unelected body. Politicians will appoint these people, but they'll have lifetime appointments. So once they are there, they are largely free from pressures. They're intended to be as free as possible. And over time, different parties will get different abilities. I mean, obviously, when it was created, there weren't parties, but different factions, different people in power will get their turns at doing it. So, you go back to the 1992 Joe Biden speech. This is the speech that Mitch McConnell dubbed creating the Biden rule, which was a complete distortion, maligning and mangling of what Biden was saying in that speech. It's an hour-long speech. It was not like a little, soundbite. But there's a lot of history in it. There's a lot of thought put into it. So I really encourage folks to find. I linked to it on a Twitter thread, but you can find it on C-SPAN, on the C-SPAN archives. And so the McConnell Republican said the Biden rule was you don't nominate a Supreme Court pick in an election year. And that's not what he said. What he said was that they gave the speech in June of 92. So this is election year, summer election year, right after the Supreme Court term was ending. They'd just been through Clarence Thomas the year before. They'd been through Robert Bork for years before that. And both were very fractious hearings. And Biden was saying to George H.W. Bush, if a vacancy arises, if somebody retires, in a week or so, I would recommend you don't nominate in the election season, but you would wait until after the election. He wasn't ruling out a nomination in the lame duck. And he said explicitly, it's not my intention to say we should hold a seat open for Democrats to pick it. That's not what I'm saying. And he further said, in times when you have a divided, different president party, different Senate party, that so long as the pick is done with the true advice and consent of the Senate, with true compromise and collaboration, the Senate should be cooperative. If the president is trying to go in a radically different ideological direction, then the Senate would have the moral obligation to oppose. But the whole speech is a lamenting of how off the rails the whole judicial process had become, and trying to get back to true advice and consent and bipartisan collaboration. And McConnell and crew twisted it to say, It means you don't get to have any pick at all in the last year. And now, by doubly warping it by adding this new wrinkle that only counts when there's an opposition, when there's a difference in parties.
Yeah.
You're saying a new principle. And the new principle is when you have the power and you have the votes, whatever you say goes. Political power. So you're saying they're not being like politicians. They're saying you should be, extremist politicians. You should be only political in this process. And if that's the principle you're setting, and look, man, I'm not a court packer and I'm not a anti-filibuster person, but you're saying to Democrats, when you get in power, I expect you to use raw political power to get your ends completely and not function in a way that's opposed to tyranny of the majority.
But I think, and I'm interviewing Ilya Shapiro of Cato, who has a book out, I forget, Supreme Disorder. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's really good. It's about the Supreme Court, and of course, it's dropping right at this time. He couldn't have known about this vacancy, or could he? No. But Ilya points out in the book, and I hope I don't mangle the facts, but here's my recollection, that there's been 19 times, I think it's 19 times, that a vacancy has been filled during an election year. However, the last time it happened, with the president and the Senate being of opposite parties, was 1888. So,
just to be clear, that's when a vacancy arises in an election year, because Kennedy was voted on in February 88, but the vacancy arose in 87. And there's one other.
So if I'm getting my facts straight, and I think I'm close.
There's one. Do you have another point to make? Because there's one other historical tidbit I would add if you were done.
Well, I'll just tie that part up in a bow. I mean, that would suggest that there is a precedent for what is happening, which is that it's normal or not abnormal for a president to nominate and have somebody confirmed in an election year, but it would be abnormal if McConnell and the Republicans had confirmed Merrick Garland. That in itself would have been abnormal.
I mean, the only abnormality in this entire thing is the Republican Senate in 2016 denying Garland a hearing. That's the abnormality.
Well, it's abnormal, but not unprecedented.
Well, it's not unprecedented to reject the nominee.
No. I mean, John Quincy Adams. I forget the quote, but I know that John Quincy Adams had somebody who was postponed. I'm trying to think of the verbiage that was used, but it was like postponed indefinitely. So they have had people in the past, nominees, who just didn't get a hearing. They just refused to bring it up for a vote. That has happened.
Well, I think
it's not in the modern era.
Well, correct. I mean, someone could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe A. Fortas got hearings in 68. He was rejected. I don't believe he was prevented from having a hearing. I will double check that because I'm curious myself, but I believe that's the case.
But I think it was certainly, it felt unfair. Certainly unfair to Merrick Garland. It felt unfair. And in hindsight, and I understand, what McConnell was doing, and I think in the short term it benefited them, but I would have said, have the hearings, take the hit, and vote him down.
Now, the other example, the other vacancy that arose in an election year that did get filled is Eisenhower in 56, where Eisenhower simply installed an appointee through a recess appointment in mid-October, not giving the Democratic Senate a chance to weigh in. Now, Eisenhower did that by appointing a Democrat, William Brennan. Now, he thought it was going to be a conservative Democrat, and he was wrong on that count. But he was a Catholic Democrat, and his political team thought it would be helpful for him. He won the Northeast in 52. I believe he'd made some kind of promise to one of the big cardinals in the Northeast that he would nominate a Catholic. And so this was a way to, maintain the Northeast Catholic support he had. And so he just jammed that through the recent appointment in a few weeks. And the Democrats didn't complain because they got a Democrat. And they confirmed the pick after the election. So there is that example, but it was crude politics. But it was not an attempt to run roughshod over the interests of the Democratic Senate.
But I think the importance of the Supreme Court has, just in our lifetime, Bill, become, where they're deciding issues like abortion, which, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said she felt like that should have been allowed to play out organically,
Amy Coney Barrett has said that as well.
Yeah, maybe Josh Hawley will accept her then.
Well, he said he would. I mean, I got a few. I had a thread about that last night, but I'll talk about that in a second.
But so I think that what has happened is in our lifetime, Bill, or close to it, and in the last 4 decades or whatever, 4 or 5 decades, we've seen the court become more important. Issues like school busing, for example, where the court is kind of, at least from a conservative standpoint, it seemed like they were imposing their will, short-circuiting the normal legislative process, and kind of, legislating from the bench is the nomenclature or the verbiage, I would say. But, the impression being that, like, it's super important to have conservative folks on the court, and then the frustration again of whether it's Republicans like Earl Warren or Nixon appointees, Berger or whatever, or even Reagan appointees or Bush, Souter. I mean, all these, the attempt to, heck, we could go up to John Roberts if we wanted to. And so the frustration, I think, has been to understand Mitch McConnell's move and to understand where conservatives are coming from. You really need to understand that context. And let me just say this too, Bill. I suspect we'll be talking about this in the weeks to come. But we've seen some foreshadowing of attacks. If Amy Coney Barrett is the nominee, we've seen the foreshadowing of some attacks that may come on her faith, her Catholic faith.
I don't think Democrats are going to go there.
And the people of praise from Reuters, for example.
Reuters doesn't have a Senate seat.
And if, in fact, she is tried to be like otherized or portrayed as being like some religious zealot or fanatic because of her faith, that would just be part of a long line of what's happened to Republican politicians and conservative nominees. When we've tried to say, look, we're going to nominate the most ironic, decent people like Mitt Romney, and then the media talks about him giving forced homophobic haircuts, or decent people like John McCain, and they get chewed up and spit out. And I think that's part of the reason that we got Donald Trump.
Well,
is that there was a sense we can't win by playing nice. We can't win by nominating qualified, competent, decent people. So let's go with Trump.
I'm not going to accept readily the notion that poor snowflake Republicans have been treated so badly by mean, ogreish Democrats that we just had to play political hardball. These guys have played rough for a very long time.
Joe Biden said of Mitt Romney, speaking to African Americans, he said, they're going to put you back in chains.
Then you have to abrogate all norms to get your judge on the court because Joe Biden had a slightly hot bit of political rhetoric. I mean, come on. How far back in the Republican dirty tricks list do I have to go to create the full ledger of meanness in the political arena, and why that would have any relevance to what we do with our Supreme Court?
But I think the difference is, and you're right. I mean, we can go through Willie Horton and go down the list of Republican things. And I could throw back the Daisy ad, right, from Lyndon Johnson. But I think the difference is that the left, liberals, progressives, control the culture, control the media. Up until, the alternate media like Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, the blogosphere is different. But the mainstream media tends to be liberal. And I think that and academia, I think that tends to freak out conservatives, helping explain the rise of Trump.
I agree that Republicans have created this entire persecution complex to justify almost anything that they do. But it really has no bearing over how we want our Supreme Court to function. Well, let's not go down that road because we're just going to go around in circles. Let's talk about Barrett because it's probably going to be Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett. Okay. Let me ask you, if it's not Barrett, how do Republicans act?
Well, I think if it's Barbara Lagoa, who is a judge in Florida, Cuban American, as far as I could tell, she's great.
Doesn't have the same paper trail on abortion.
Well, no, I don't think she's been involved in like constitutional law to the degree that Barrett has. So Josh Hawley, let's talk. I think that's where you're heading, right?
Yeah.
So Josh Hawley is the senator from Missouri. He is an advocate of this common good constitutionalism, as far as I can tell, like the Sohrab Ahmari Deneen school that says it's no longer about playing by the rules. It's about nominating our people. And so we're not even going to pretend that we're just nominating someone who will, have a strict interpretation of the Constitution or be a textualist or an originalist. We're just going to say we're going to nominate our people. Right.
Well, let me be a little more fair to Hawley here.
Our people, they have to have been on the record, according to Hawley, right? They have to have been on the record as opposing Roe versus Wade.
Hawley has said, and we're going to be fair to Hawley here. Okay. He is saying you have to have demonstrably, publicly said that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided. He did not say you have to promise to overturn it. Okay. But he wants people on the record say that it was wrongly decided. So as a way to kind of really put a fine point on what is your constitutional philosophy and jurisprudence.
Yeah.
Now,
he's saying that Amy Coney Barrett qualifies, and I don't think she does.
She doesn't.
I think what happened is Josh Hawley got over his skis and was trying to make news and establish a new rule, and he didn't realize RBG was going to die. And so RBG dies, and then what is Josh Hawley going to vote against Donald Trump's nominee? If Donald Trump picks Amy Coney Barrett and she follows precedent, which would be to not to basically not comment on that specifically, is Josh Hawley really going to vote against Amy Coney Barrett?
Well, he's not. He's not.
So now Josh Hawley has to pretend that Amy Coney Barrett has said something she hasn't, which I argue does a disservice to Amy Coney Barrett, actually, and hurts her chances of being confirmed, or at least creates problems for her.
Well, so if it is Lagoa, I mean, and I want to talk about Barrett and abortion because she has said a number of things and done a lot of things on abortion that are highly relevant here. Lagoa hasn't. So, and Hawley was asked specifically about Lagoa the other day, and he said, I got to look into it.
Right.
So and that's
going to come down to him getting assurances that she's great which is basically what George H.W. Bush got about David Souter.
But Hawley specifically said it is not enough to be told during the nomination process that you think it was wrong to decide. He wants the proof beforehand. So if he did that, that would be a really true, flip-flop, back down, surrender from what. I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, some people have said to me when I've brought this up on Twitter, like, he's going to back down on that. And maybe, but I'm not going to say I know what he's going to do. But he set the standard, man. I mean, he's the one that wanted to make a big deal that he was holier than thou on everybody else on abortion. And I assume people do that because they want to be seen as holier than thou on abortion. If you back down off it, then you fail in your own goal in setting a standard for yourself. So I don't know what he would do with Lagoa.
I would dare him to stop Donald Trump's pick. Could you imagine? So Mitch McConnell is like a quarterback managing, looking down the field. There's 30 seconds left on the clock. He's Tom Brady. Can they score a touchdown before the game ends or before halftime, whatever? It depends if Trump's reelected, but they're trying to to punch in one last score. And McConnell's got, okay, Romney's open. Romney's in. Okay. Cory Gardner's in. Okay. We lost Collins. Could you imagine Josh Hawley effing this up for Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell?
Well, you tell me. If Hawley went out there, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if Hawley went out there, it's Lagoa, okay?
Yeah.
Or it's Trump's sister. Who knows?
Well, this Trump's sister, I'm on the bandwagon too. Not that.
Fair enough. If Hawley said, fellow conservatives, fellow protectors of life, we have been lied to too many times. We have been hoodwinked. We've been suckered. Even very recently, we got betrayed by Neil Gorsuch. We got betrayed by John Roberts. We cannot be betrayed again. I don't care who the president is. I don't care who might be the next president. I'm not going to let advocates for life be snookered one more time. How would the pro-life community respond to a stance like that?
Donald Trump is the man. If Donald Trump wants a nominee, then that is the pro-life, that is the conservative position. And Josh Hawley is standing athwart that. So Hawley would find himself by himself if he does that.
So let's talk Barrett.
Unless Donald Trump decided, that's a good idea. I mean, who knows? You never know with Trump. But if Trump wants this and McConnell wants this, it doesn't matter what Josh Hawley wants. And it would be so entertaining if he actually tries to hold the line on this. Because, Bill, I don't have to say the unspoken thing here is that the reason conservatives don't go around talking about overturning Roe versus Wade is because it makes it less likely they will ever get to overturn Roe versus Wade.
This is why I want to talk Barrett, because, here are all the signs that show she is hostile towards Roe. She has said life begins at conception. She gave a talk on the 40th anniversary of Roe at Notre Dame, where, as Ginsburg had done, she and I haven't seen the video. I haven't found the video. I've seen 2 news articles about it. It sounded like she was speaking more like a political analyst.
Apparently, it was a long interview she did on This Week or something, and it didn't. I don't think it made a splash at the time.
I think you're conflating 2 incidents.
Oh, am I? Okay, sorry. You're talking about a Notre Dame speech.
Yeah, there's a Notre Dame sort of symposium called Roe at 40, and she said, there are some scholars, on both sides of the issue that have argued by deciding Roe when they did, while the issue was playing out in the states and trending towards the pro-choice direction, that they kind of put the cart before the horse and created so-called quote-unquote Roe rage, which created this huge backlash and poisoned judicial confirmation processes and so forth. So on one hand, you can look at that and saying she sounds like Roe is wrongly decided, but she's also suggesting that she's not talking about the content of the academic opinion.
Right.
So on the politics of it. And now on top of that, again, on the sort of pro-life side of the ledger, she has written a law review article which is very critical of fealty to stare decisis. That precedent should hold. She's argued that, hey, if something is wrongly decided, stare decisis should not keep it around. So that would be the justification of overturning Roe v. Wade. And as a judge, she's a judge now. She's ruled on a couple of cases where I don't believe she was in the majority, but her opinion was that a certain state restriction should be upheld. So that I think there's demonstrable evidence she would, without hesitation, weaken Roe. And there are many people that believe that the game is not to flat overturn Roe and create another round of Roe rage, but to do it more subtly, incrementally over time.
I think she said somewhere that she thinks the fight is over public funding, that's where...
Well, that was the Notre Dame Symposium. Okay. Now, mind you, this was during the Obama years. This was about 7, 8 years ago. So she may not hold that exact same view now, and certainly may feel differently when she is in the Supreme Court seat making the decision. So I don't know how much stock to put in that particular comment. So she's clearly hostile to Roe. She would not keep status quo. But I do think it's an open question whether she would be a vote for immediate overturning. Yeah. And mind you, Roberts is the Chief Justice. So if Roberts is in the majority, he issues the opinion. So as long as he can stay in the majority, he controls what the opinion says. And he has been an incrementalist by and large more recently. So
that's why I think a lot of the hysteria over how, this is a stolen seat, and they're going to appoint these crazy right-wingers, and they're going to, what is it, Robert Bork's America? What did Ted Kennedy say, that Robert Bork's America with back alley abortions and the Klan rioting, whatever. John Roberts is not a white supremacist. I mean, Gorsuch is not the perfect conservative who's, right-wing guy who's going to give us everything we want. Like, the idea that these are not QAnon people we're nominating. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett is a highly qualified, didn't she clerk for Scalia, I think?
She clerked for Scalia. She's a law prof. She's a judge now. Her resume, just in terms of like things she has done, is fine. And when you see her on TV, she's not going to come off like a crazy person.
So the idea that this is like, is Donald Trump is foisting this like insane existential threat on us, that part of it also doesn't ring true to me either. But that's how it's gonna be portrayed, right?
Well, mind you, no, she has expressed hostility to stare decisis. So it's also possible that Roberts could say, hey guys, let's not go off the deep end here, just overturn Roe. I got this incremental plan. And Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett say, sorry, guy, we're not joining that opinion. We got 5 to overturn. Screw you, buddy. Thomas gets to write this one. Good luck. So the possibility exists. So I don't want to be sanguine about it from a pro-choice perspective. But it's also possible that it goes the slower route. And remember that this is the Supreme Court. They're at lifetime appointments. There's a reason why Roberts did not do what Republicans wanted on Obamacare or the census or on the Louisiana abortion law this year. There's a reason why Gorsuch did not do what they wanted on transgender rights or with Native American sovereignty in Oklahoma. When you get there, you can do whatever the heck you want. And so we're not going to know exactly what Barrett's going to do, even though we have lots of clues here. I mean, I think there's enough to say she's going to, at minimum, weaken because she has done that in the job of judge. But beyond that, you don't know. And that's relevant to the question, is it a immediate imperative for Democrats to pack the court. If the conclusion is they're going to overturn Roe within a 2-year period, then hell yeah, you pack the court to stop them from doing that. Now, I would argue that doesn't necessarily solve your problem, because it could, as soon as 2025, depending on where the politics go, the Republicans could pack the court and try to pull the same trick on you, and then you really.
Or why not now? I am not advising this because I don't want to escalate. I actually don't think what Republicans are doing now is escalating, but packing the court would be escalating. But if Democrats are going to do it, I bet you Donald Trump could confirm 5 or 10 Supreme Court justices between now and January if they wanted to.
They have to know to do that. They have to decide to do that.
If Democrats are saying they're going to pack the court,
well, Biden's not going to say that between now and January 20th.
Has Biden? Here's a question for you, Bill. Since RBG died, has Biden or Kamala Harris spoken about court packing or killing the filibuster?
Biden was asked just the other day, and he said, I'm not going to answer that because every time Donald Trump tries to change the subject, and I'm not going to change the subject. So you can interpret that as you wish, but that's the most recent thing that he said. Now, Biden has said many, many times before that he's not for court packing, not for limiting the filibuster. Again, you can go back decades on Joe Biden. I mean, if there's anybody who has been for norms and bipartisanship, specifically about judges, it is Joe Biden. So I think you really got to push him to the brink if he was going to flip flop on that.
I think what Republicans should do is, now I know their word isn't worth very much, so that's the caveat, that what they say doesn't hold a lot of water. But I think Mitch McConnell and Trump, they should say, we could pack the court now. We're not gonna. And if we win re-election, we will not pack the court either. So do not worry about that from us.
I mean, the word of Mitch McConnell at this point,
I know,
is not strong.
Although one thing he said did turn out right, Bill. When Harry Reid decided to kill the filibuster for lower court appointments, Mitch McConnell did say, you will regret this within, it won't take a long time, and you will regret having done this. It will turn around on you. That prediction by Mitch McConnell actually, I think, was correct.
But I think Mitch McConnell should heed his own words. They may regret this. And I don't just mean they may regret it because Democrats will eliminate the filibuster and crowd the court. I don't know if they're going to do that. But they may unleash. Well, the number of things might happen here. I mean,
the mistake McConnell made was in 2016, not today. See, that's the thing. But he made a mistake in 2016 about, and that was probably, he saw it as payback or survival or whatever. But I mean, what's happening now to me isn't the problem. It's the way they handled 2016. But
McConnell's still functioning and Trump is functioning explicitly as when we have the votes, we can do what we want. I mean, it is a straight tyranny of the majority argument. And so they may regret this because Democrats will embrace that too.
You mean like passing Obamacare on a pure party line vote
with 60 votes? They did a technical correction reconciliation. They had 60 votes, and they know everything else the Democrats did was with Republican votes. There's nothing out beyond the pale in doing that. What I think that McConnell and Trump may regret is, I mean, there is a pro-choice majority here. So a good chunk of Trump's voters are pro-choice, not the majority of them, but there is a faction of pro-choice Trump voters, at least there was in 2016. Now, it may be that elevating abortion, and granted, Democrats are not trying to elevate abortion here, they're trying to elevate health care. They're trying to say, hey, they might overturn the Affordable Care Act in November if they do this. That's the main Democratic message. But abortion, it's hard to keep abortion out of this discussion. Look, that might help Republicans in the South Carolina Senate race and the Texas Senate race and the Kansas Senate race and the Georgia Senate race. But it might not help. I don't think it's going to help Trump in the presidential race and it might not help in Iowa or Montana, maybe not North Carolina or even Alaska. I mean, Alaska and Montana have pretty big libertarian streaks. I just saw a poll, the New York Times poll for Iowa, where Greenfield was up 3 on Ernst, and this is just one anecdotal voter from who got surveyed, who says, this is an older white woman, who said, I'm against abortion, but I don't think they should overturn Roe and put someone who's got impregnated from a traumatic situation, in trouble. If you elevate this issue in a deeply polarizing process, I mean, the types of backlash you might engender are myriad. And to your other earlier point that it's because the court has become so influential, it makes this such an important prize to claim. I would argue, I mean, there's certainly examples you can point to, of course, where there's some big court decisions that have been made, but there's also examples where justices don't do what you want because it's designed to be separate from politics. So the true partisan capture has been elusive over time. It's been elusive. Republicans have had a majority of the court since '69, and they don't always get what they want out of it. So you're really bending over backwards here. I mean, you're potentially risking Senate seats. You're risking the Maine Senate seat. You're risking the Colorado Senate seat, maybe even the Iowa and North Carolina and Alaska and Montana Senate seats over this, because you are convinced this is the Holy Grail. So you might as well do everything for it. And who cares if you lose after that, because then you got that prize. And maybe that prize isn't that good. Maybe that prize doesn't do what you want it to do.
I think this is, I think this is generally good politics for Republicans. I think this is a net positive for Republicans electorally. I don't think that's the reason to do it, but I hear what you're saying about making abortion an issue. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a backlash or it might change, but just as of now, I think this is a net positive politically for them.
On the Senate level or the presidential level or both?
Both.
You think Trump is going to gain in the polls, or perhaps maybe not picked up in the polls, but get a increase in base turnout, maybe pull some non-voters in and narrow the gap in some way because of this, without there being a neutralizing effect of polarization on the other side?
So I think a couple things. One, I think it brings home people like me who don't like Trump, but now, see, what this does is the election's no longer about Trump. The election's no longer a referendum on Trump. It's bigger than Trump. And then what's going to happen is the left is going to attack, let's say, Amy Coney Barrett, and they're going to attack her over her faith. And that's going to be bigger than Trump.
Well, you're assuming that's going to happen.
I'm assuming. I think it's a pretty safe assumption. And so that's bigger than Trump. Now they're attacking me and my values. And Scrooge, I don't like Trump. He says crazy stuff. I don't like him. But this is game on. This is a culture war now. And they're coming after me and the things that I believe in. And then the other thing this does is it's no longer about Joe Biden. See, Joe Biden is this nice guy that's hard to demonize. But now it's going to be AOC and Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris, who's on the Judiciary Committee. And, what's Kamala she's going to go into a fight with Amy Coney Barrett, or Cory Booker's going to say something mean. This is no longer about Trump, who people don't like. And it's no longer about Biden, whom people like. So I think that at the presidential level, it's, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk for Trump, but I think it's a net positive.
I don't think we've talked enough about Kamala Harris getting to question the nominee. And what that's going to Kamala Harris will get to question the nominee in the hearings.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because all these Republicans running for all these incumbent senators are going to have to spend some time, presumably, on this nomination that may take them off the campaign trail where they're running for re-election. But then, as as we both noted, I mean, Kamala Harris is a sitting U.S. senator who's on the Judiciary Committee. We remember that bizarre thing where she suggested that Brett Kavanaugh had some meeting with somebody that we thought there was going to be a big reveal, and then it went nowhere.
I do. I suspect the question she asked will go through more vetting and more approval from a certain superior than how she approached it. I mean, look, Kamala's a good questioner in general. She's a prosecutor. I mean, I agree with you. I think she went farther than she should have in that question because she didn't have the goods.
She spent like 5 minutes, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, she knows something. There's some I didn't quite understand like who these people were and why it would be bad if Brett Kavanaugh, but her line of questioning clearly suggested that she knew the answer and that it was going to be some smoking gun revelation, and she just forgot about it.
She should not have. If she didn't have the goods, she shouldn't have pursued that line of questioning.
Weird.
But I don't think she's going to do that with Barrett. But it is a fairly high stakes exchange how she handles that, and obviously I can't predict how that's going to go. Let me ask you this question. So from what I read, it looks like the Republicans are aiming for a final vote in the last week of October. So they're cutting into what had been their scheduled recess time to get this done before Election Day, 1 week before Election Day. Is that the right political move? Is it worth sacrificing campaign trail time for their Senate candidates who are incumbents to lock in the confirmation before Election Day and remove the confirmation as a motivating factor to vote? You got to vote for me because we need this mandate to do it in the lame duck.
I would say, as a conservative, I view this as the right thing to do on principle, even though you could argue politics would be. So in other words, Donald Trump specifically might be better off doing this in the lame duck. I'm happy he's not, because a bird in the hand, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what the future may hold. So I would say get this vote as soon as you can get it. And, but I think you could argue that politically it would be better to hold it over. I'm glad that they're not doing that for political reasons. I would rather have get this thing over with as soon as you can. But yeah, I mean, I think you could make an argument that Trump could sort of hold everybody hostage, in a way.
I mean, I could see Trump going to
better vote for me.
I mean, I don't see it now, but I could have seen Trump going to rallies and saying, "Hey, you better come and vote for me, you bastards!
Yeah,
you don't show up on Election Day, you don't get your judge."
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine that, and so in a way, I'm actually kind of impressed and happy that Trump is not doing that.
I mean, I wonder to what extent is Trump really driving this train? I mean, the judges are the one thing where, I mean, I believe it was reported, maybe in the earlier Woodward book, that Trump was musing about nominating Merrick Garland for one of the earlier positions, and everyone around him was like, "Hey, guy, you are not doing that." There is a team of Federalist Society people around Trump who keep him on the straight and narrow when it comes to judges.
Sure. But think of it this way. There was a team around him that could have kept him on the straight and narrow when it came to foreign policy, and they didn't. I mean, Trump understands that he needs to deliver there are only a couple of deliverables he has to have to keep conservatives on board, to keep the I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue thing on board. And this is clearly one of them, or at least Trump believes that delivering on judges is one of them. Because if he could nominate his sister if he wanted to. He doesn't have to listen to Leonard Leo. I'm glad he is. I'm glad he does. I'm glad he believes that he needs to deliver on this. He has to deliver this one thing, but he could go rogue.
I think he doesn't care. I think he cares about foreign policy to some degree. There are certain foreign policy principles that he has that he's held for a long time. One of which being, let's be nice to Russia, and he doesn't want to abandon those. Whereas with judges, I don't think he is deeply driven to overturn Roe v. Wade. But if you got 100 people around you saying you better do this because your people want it, and you'll make your rallies, you'll make all your rally goers very happy, like that, then he'll listen.
Well, I mean, but I could just as easily hear him saying, these people have been wrong about everything. They don't know what they're talking about. All they do is lose. They nominate people that aren't even good. Don't even do what they want. I listen to them, and and what do they know? They were telling George W. Bush what to do. I mean, you could imagine a scenario where he didn't listen to them.
But they told him in May of 2016, a week after he wrapped up the nomination in Indiana, when he was weak amongst evangelicals. The evangelicals were largely with Cruz. And he was leading a divided party, and he was told to get these folks on board. You put out a list of judges. He did it right away, and it worked like a charm. Yep. So I think he knows that that's the one advice he was told that panned out, and he keeps listening. Well,
good. I'm glad there's something he's listening to, and if I have to endure this Trump administration, at least I can get a good judge out of it. So I'm rooting for that. And by the way, I wrote about this at the Daily Beast. This really puts, there's different flavors of NeverTrumpers, as you know, Bill. But there's one flavor of NeverTrumper who's campaigning, who says, I want Republicans to lose the Senate. Which is like, well, even Larry Hogan doesn't want that. He's campaigning for Susan Collins, But
he's not campaigning for Republicans across the board.
He is, but there are some NeverTrumpers who think every Republican except for Mitt Romney should lose, and they're trying to help Democrats take the Senate.
Well, that's the Lincoln Project.
Okay, not to name names.
Well, they're not hiding that fact. They're saying Republicans need to be punished fully and completely for their complicity with Trump, so the party will eventually change.
But, Bill, here's the next thing that's going to happen. They are basically going to be okay, I'll ask this way. What are these NeverTrumpers going to do if Trump nominates Amy Coney Barrett and she is highly qualified and the left attacks her viciously and they're going to be against this nomination? Is that really the position that they want to take? Is that really what this is? They want to be about? Do they really want to be about stopping Donald Trump from nominating and the Senate confirming a qualified conservative? And I'm using the term conservative as a catch-all for judicial philosophy. But anyway, I know you're not pedantic, Bill. You're not, which I love about you. You're not. Even though I know in your head you're like, he should be saying originalist. But anyway, I think it's RBG's death put these NeverTrump conservatives in a very awkward position where, like, if they're not careful, they're like on the record now opposing Republicans running for Senate who are not Donald Trump and Amy Coney Barrett as a Supreme Court justice. That's a weird place to be in if you're ostensibly a conservative.
I mean, I think that's where they are. I haven't seen everything the Lincoln Project has done in the past week. I did see an ad they cut for the South Carolina Senate race where it's basically Lindsey Graham's words, I think from the Atlantic forum that he did. This was in 2018. This was the tail end of the Kavanaugh process, where he said, "Hold the tape."
That was so hilarious.
And then what was interesting about the Lincoln Project?
That tape on me if I do this. Yeah, it's great.
What was interesting about that ad, because my mind, Graham flip-flopping on this is good for him in South Carolina. South Carolinians probably want a Trump judge. He doesn't want to be held to the standard he was holding before. And I've not been a Lincoln Project fanboy. I mean, I'm not a hater, but I'm kind of skeptical that some of the ads they do are really useful in persuading soft Republicans. They often seem to be good at rallying hardcore liberals and progressives, which seems to be kind of beside the point of the Lincoln Project. But this,
and I would say they're also good at driving Trump crazy, which
yes,
could be a plus or a minus depending on the externalities there.
But the South Carolina ad only showed the 2018 comments. They didn't show the flip-flop.
Yeah.
So if you weren't really paying close attention, you think Lindsey Graham is actually opposing the Trump judge. Now, how much that would actually work to confuse a voter when Graham's literally about to chair the Judiciary Committee hearings. Yeah. But I thought that was at least a little bit clever on the Lincoln Project's part. So I
think that it could actually hurt Lindsey with conservatives, because it would make them think he's opposing Trump's nominee.
I think that's what the Lincoln Project was trying to do. I mean, and
I would say don't attribute malice when they just put a video together. Could actually be the reason. Bill, I have this weird situation where my computer, I can't use my main computer to do this anymore for a whole variety of weird scenarios that I could explain to you. So I'm now on about 20% battery.
Okay, well, we've gone for an hour. I think we've done our darndest to
I need to
make sense of all this.
This laptop, a power. I just need to get my cord over here, which is going to take some maneuvering. Trust me.
I want to plug a couple things. One, we have our DM Zoom tomorrow. Special guest Jamie Weinstein of the Jamie Weinstein Show podcast. So if you're not a Patreon supporter of one of us, you can do so now. You'll get the Zoom information. So you can talk with us, talk with Jamie. And I started a YouTube series of solo YouTube commentaries called Shareable, which is on my own YouTube channel, which is Bill Scher. And I encourage you, if you never listen to me one time, please subscribe. I'll be very blunt about this. You need a certain number of subscribers to get into the advertising program. So this is, we're trying to make a living here, people. Trying to make a few bucks. If you subscribe, I'm very appreciative. And I'm going to try to do them at least a couple times a week.
I need to subscribe. I haven't done that.
Seriously.
I've liked it on Facebook and I've tweeted it, I think, but I need to subscribe to the YouTube page so that you reach that.
That's right. You need 1,000 subscribers. You need 1,000 subscribers and a certain number of watch hours within a year before they let you get ads.
Bastards.
So you actually got to produce a lot of content to get to those watch hours, which is frustrating. But I can't leave money on the table, Matt.
Cannot do that. Check that out. And then I did a podcast with the aforementioned Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. This was an interview we did for the Texas Tribune Festival, and we talked about his book, which is quite good, and it talks all about overcoming riots, overcoming cancer. He managed to win twice in deep blue Maryland, his not being a Trumper, not supporting Trump. And I asked him about the Supreme Court thing, too, and he says Republicans should not rush a justice on a party line vote. So he's with your governor, Charlie Baker.
Did Baker say that on the judge?
He said that it should happen with whoever wins should nominate.
Moderate Republican governors know how to stay in office.
Awesome, man. Well, again, check us out on Friday at the DM Zoom, which is fun. Bill and I will talk for a half hour, and then we'll bring in Jamie Weinstein, and should be good fun, good clean fun for the family.
All right, I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, see you guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks.